The day my father pointed at me in court and called me a thief, I did not cry. I smiled, because he had no idea that the woman in the black robe, the judge, was the mother he told me died when I was 5 years old. My name is Amelia Cross, and this is the story of how my father tried to destroy me, and how the mother I had buried in my heart rose from the grave to save us both. I was 5 years old when my father sat me down on the bottom step of our staircase and told me my mother was gone. I remember every detail of that morning, the way the sunlight came through the window in slanted yellow bars, the way my stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers, dangled from my hand by one torn ear, the way my father, Victor Cross, knelt in front of me with tears streaming down his face, tears that seemed too perfect, too practiced, even to my 5-year-old eyes. "Your mother got sick, Amelia," he said, his voice cracking like dry wood. "Very sick. The doctors did everything they could, but she didn't make it. She's in heaven now." I asked if she was coming back. He shook his head and pulled me into a hug that felt less like comfort and more like a cage. There was a funeral after that, a closed casket, so many flowers I could barely breathe. My grandmother on my father's side kept squeezing my shoulder and saying, "Cross women don't cry." So I didn't cry. Not then, not for a very long time. But I never stopped wondering why the casket was so small for a grown woman. I never stopped wondering why no one would look me in the eye. And I never stopped dreaming that my mother was still out there somewhere, waiting for me. I grew up in my father's shadow. Victor Cross was a powerful man, a real estate developer who had built half the buildings in the city. He was also a liar, a manipulator, and a man who saw people as tools to be used and discarded. I learned this slowly, over years of small betrayals. Alha, he remarried when I was 8. A woman named Vanessa who was young and cold and made it clear that I was an inconvenience. They had 2 children together, a boy and a girl, and I became the ghost in that house. The daughter from the first marriage, the one no one talked about. I ate dinner alone in my room. I went to school events alone. I celebrated birthdays with cards that had money inside but no handwriting, no love, no presents. My father was always working, always traveling, always too busy to notice that his oldest daughter was drowning. By the time I was 16, I had stopped expecting anything from him. I had stopped expecting anything from anyone. I threw myself into my studies, got a scholarship to a good university, and left that house the day I turned 18. I told myself I would never come back. I told myself I didn't need a family. I told myself that my mother was dead, and my father was dead to me, and that was just the way things had to be. But the truth was messier than that. The truth was that I never stopped missing my mother. I never stopped wondering what she looked like, what her voice sounded like, whether she would have been proud of me. I kept a photograph of her on my nightstand, the only one my father hadn't destroyed. In it, she was young and smiling, holding me as a baby. Her eyes were green, like mine. Her hair was dark, like mine. She looked happy, genuinely happy, not the kind of happy you fake for a camera. And every night, before I went to sleep, I looked at that photograph and whispered, "I hope you're okay. I hope you're proud of me. I hope you didn't want to leave." I was 24 years old when I started asking questions. I had graduated from university, moved to a small apartment across the city, and started working as a forensic accountant, a job that required me to follow money, to find the cracks in stories, to uncover the truth that people tried to hide. And one day, while I was cleaning out a closet in my apartment, I found a box of my mother's things that I had taken from my father's house without his knowledge. Inside were letters, photographs, and a journal. My mother's journal. I opened it with trembling hands and began to read. The first few entries were mundane, shopping lists, reminders, little notes about my first steps and first words. But the deeper I read, the darker the entries became. She wrote about arguments, about my father's temper, about nights when she locked herself in the bathroom just to feel safe, about the time he threw a lamp at her head and she had to lie to the emergency room doctors about how she got the concussion, about the time he held a knife to her throat while I slept in the next room. The last entry was dated the week she died. It said, "I have to leave. I have to disappear. If I stay, he will kill me. And if he kills me, no one will ever know the truth. I pray that Amelia will forgive me someday. I pray that she will understand that I didn't abandon her. I ran to survive. And I will come back for her when she is old enough to protect herself, if she wants me." I closed the journal and sat in silence for a long time. Then I hired a private investigator. Her name was Samira Khan, a former FBI agent with sharp eyes and a sharper instinct. She cost more than I could afford, but I paid her anyway. I needed to know the truth. For 3 months, Samira dug. She found bank records, property deeds, old court filings. And then, one evening, she called me with a voice that was barely hiding her excitement. "Amelia," she said, "your mother is alive. She's been living 2 states away for the past 23 years under a different name. She's a judge, a respected one. She goes by Eleanor Marsh now." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. I just sat there, holding the phone, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. My mother was alive. My mother was a judge. And my father had lied to me for 23 years. Samira sent me a photograph. In it, my mother was leaving a courthouse, wearing a black robe, laughing with a clerk. She was older, of course. Her hair was grey, her face lined with years I had not been part of. But her eyes were the same, green, bright, alive. I stared at that photograph for hours. I memorized every detail. The way she held her shoulders, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she smiled with her whole face. I wanted to drive to her town that night. I wanted to knock on her door and fall into her arms and say, "I'm here, I'm here, I'm here." But Samira advised me to wait. "Your father is still dangerous," she said, "and he's been watching you. If you reach out to her now, he'll find out, and he'll destroy both of you." So I waited. And I planned. And I watched my mother from a distance, visiting her town twice a year, sitting in coffee shops across the street from the courthouse just to see her walk by. She never knew I was there, but I knew. And that was enough for now. Then, 5 years ago, my father made his move. He had been struggling financially, bad investments, a lawsuit from a former business partner, a gambling addiction I had discovered while digging through his records. He needed money, and he knew that my maternal grandmother, the one who had died when I was a teenager, had left me a trust fund. $300,000. Not a fortune, but enough to save him from bankruptcy. So he did what he always did when he was cornered. He attacked. He filed a lawsuit claiming that I had stolen the money from my mother's estate. Never mind that the estate didn't exist. Never mind that the money was legally mine. Never mind that my mother had been alive the whole time. He hired expensive lawyers, fabricated documents, coached witnesses, and painted me as a greedy, entitled daughter who had looted her dead mother's legacy. I was served with papers on a cold Tuesday morning. I read them on my doorstep, still in my bathrobe, and felt something I hadn't felt in years: fear. But then, I remembered the photograph in my drawer. The judge in the black robe. My mother. I called Samira. "It's time," I said. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later. During those 6 months, I prepared. I gathered evidence, bank records, the journal, the letters, the police reports Samira had uncovered. I built a case that would expose my father's lies. But I did something else too, something I hadn't planned. I wrote a letter to my mother, not a long letter, just a few lines. "Dear Eleanor," I wrote, using her new name, "I know who you are. I know you are my mother. I am not angry. I am not asking for anything. I just want you to know that I am being sued by Victor. The trial is in 6 months. I don't expect you to do anything. But I thought you should know. Your daughter, Amelia." I mailed the letter to her courthouse address and waited. 2 weeks later, a response arrived. It was a single sentence, handwritten on a small piece of paper. "I have been waiting for this day for 23 years. I will be there. Love, Mum." I cried when I read that. For the first time since I was 5 years old, I cried for my mother. And they were not sad tears. They were tears of hope. The trial took place in a crowded courtroom on the a third floor of the county courthouse. The room was cold, the kind of cold that settles into your bones and stays there. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. The gallery was half full with reporters, curious strangers, and a few of my father's business associates who had come to watch the show. My father sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in a suit that cost more than my monthly rent, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they had been carved from marble. I sat alone at the defense table. I had no lawyer. I had no money for one. My father had frozen my accounts as part of the lawsuit. I had no witnesses, no evidence that I could present without legal representation, no hope, or so he thought. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood, and the door behind the bench opened. Judge Eleanor Marsh walked through. She was older than the photograph Samira had given me. 5 years had passed since I had last seen her from across the street. Her hair was completely white now. Her face was lined with grief and wisdom. But her eyes, those green eyes, were exactly the same. They swept across the courtroom with the weight of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the case file in front of her. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was calm, measured, the voice of someone who had spent decades commanding respect. "This is case number 2024 CV 0892, Cross versus Cross. Plaintiff Victor Cross accuses defendant Amelia Cross of theft from the estate of Evelyn Cross, deceased." She paused. Her eyes lifted from the file and landed on my father. "Is that correct, Mr. Cross?" My father stood up, all charm and confidence. He was a handsome man, even in his 60s. Silver hair, sharp jaw, the kind of smile that had opened doors and closed deals for 40 years. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, "and I intend to prove that my daughter has been stealing from her dead mother's memory, and her money, for years." Judge Marsh's expression did not change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes, something cold, something patient, something that looked almost like a smile. "Very well," she said. "Proceed." The first 2 days of the trial were brutal. My father took the stand and performed the role of the grieving widower with Oscar-worthy precision. He talked about my mother as if she had been a saint. He talked about her illness, a rare cancer, very aggressive, very painful, in heartbreaking detail. He talked about her final days, her final words, her final wishes. He cried, real tears, or what looked like them. The jury, 8 men and 4 women, leaned forward, captivated. "Evelyn wanted Amelia to have something," my father said, dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief. "She wanted her daughter to know she was loved, so she set aside a small fund. But when she died, Amelia didn't just take what was hers. She took everything. She drained her mother's accounts. She left nothing for the rest of the family, nothing for me, nothing for her siblings, nothing." The jury looked at me. Some of them looked angry. One woman shook her head in disgust. I sat still, my hands hidden beneath the table, trembling. My father's lawyers called witness after witness. A bank manager who testified that I had made large withdrawals from my mother's account, an account that they claimed had been frozen at the time of her death. A cousin who swore she had heard me brag about the money at a family gathering. A forensic accountant who said the numbers didn't add up, that money had been moved in ways that suggested deliberate concealment. All of it was lies, or half-truths, or truths twisted so far out of shape they no longer resembled reality. But the jury didn't know that. They only knew what they heard. And what they heard was a story about a greedy daughter who had stolen from her dead mother's grave. By the end of the second day, I was sure I was going to lose. I sat in my cheap motel room that night, staring at the photograph of my mother, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't do this on my own." On the morning of the third day, everything changed. Judge Marsh called both parties to her chambers before court began. My father and his lawyers went in first. They emerged 20 minutes later. My father looked pale. His lawyers looked nervous. Then the bailiff called my name. "Ms. Cross, the judge will see you now." I walked into the chambers with my heart pounding. Judge Marsh was sitting behind her desk, reading a document. She didn't look up when I entered. "Please sit, Ms. Cross," she said. I sat. The chair was uncomfortable. Everything about this room was designed to remind you that you were small and she was not. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, and I looked at her, and in that silence I saw something pass between us. A recognition, a connection, a thread that had never been broken, no matter how many years had passed. "Do you know why I didn't recuse myself from this case?" she asked finally. I swallowed. "I have an idea, Your Honor." She nodded slowly. "I've been waiting for this day for a very long time, Amelia. 23 years. Your mother—" She stopped, corrected herself. "I have been waiting 23 years for the chance to face Victor Cross in a courtroom, not as his wife, not as his victim, as his equal." She pulled out a sealed envelope from her desk drawer. It was yellowed with age, the edges soft and frayed. On the front, in handwriting I recognized from the journal, my mother's handwriting, were the words, "For Judge Eleanor Marsh. Open only if Victor Cross ever sues my daughter." "Your mother gave me this before she disappeared," Judge Marsh said. "She asked me to hold on to it. She said that if Victor ever came after you, legally or otherwise, I would know what to do. She trusted me to protect you when she couldn't." I stared at the envelope. She knew. She knew he would do this. Your mother knew Victor better than anyone. She knew he was capable of anything, including this, including lying about her death, including trying to destroy his own daughter. She slid the envelope across the desk toward me. "I'm going to read this in open court today, Amelia. The contents of this letter will end this case, but they will also expose your father for what he truly is. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my father, sitting in the courtroom, confident and smug. I thought about the lies he had told, the years he had stolen, the mother he had kept from me. I thought about the knife he had held to her throat, the fear she had lived with, the sacrifice she had made to survive. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric. My father was whispering to his lawyers, probably strategizing his closing argument. The jury looked bored. The reporters looked hungry. Judge Marsh took her seat. She didn't announce anything. She simply said, "Before we proceed with final arguments, the court has received a document that it wishes to enter into evidence." My father's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. We haven't seen this document. We haven't had a chance to review it or challenge its authenticity." "Overruled," Judge Marsh said. Her voice went on, as steel wrapped in velvet. "Sit down, counsel." He sat. The courtroom went silent. Judge Marsh opened the envelope. She pulled out a single sheet of paper, handwritten in faded blue ink, dated 23 years ago, and she began to read. "To whom it may concern, and to the Honourable Judge Eleanor Marsh, my name is Evelyn Cross. If you are reading this, I am either dead or Victor has done something unforgivable. I pray it is the former, because the alternative means he has hurt someone else, likely my daughter, Amelia. I left my daughter not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Victor threatened to kill me. He threatened to kill Amelia. He told me that if I stayed, he would make sure I never saw our daughter again. He had already broken my arm. He had already given me a concussion. He had already held a knife to my throat while my baby slept in the next room. I ran to protect us both. The money Victor is accusing Amelia of stealing does not belong to me. It never did. It belonged to my mother, who left it to Amelia in her will. Victor has no claim to it. None. He never did. If Victor ever tells a court that Amelia stole from me, he is lying. I leave everything to my daughter, not because I don't trust Victor, but because I know exactly what he is. I love my daughter. I have never stopped loving my daughter. And I pray that one day she will understand why I had to disappear. I pray that she will forgive me. And I pray that the person reading this letter, the judge, the lawyer, whoever you are, will do everything in your power to protect her. Because Victor Cross is a monster, and monsters do not stop until someone stops them. Evelyn Cross. I took my mother's maiden name. Victor doesn't own me anymore. The courtroom was silent. Not the kind of silence that happens when people are waiting for something. The kind of silence that happens when everyone has stopped breathing. My father's face had gone white. Not pale, white. The colour of milk. The colour of paper. The colour of a man who had just realised he was standing on a trap door. That's not, he stammered. That's not real. She's dead. She's been dead for... Judge Marsh looked up from the letter. She removed her glasses. She looked my father directly in the eye, and she said, "Hello, Victor. Long time." My father stumbled backward. His chair scraped against the floor. His lawyers looked at him, then at the judge, then back at him, confusion and horror spreading across their faces like fire. "No," he whispered. "No, you're not. You can't be." "I'm not who?" Judge Marsh asked. Her voice was calm, devastatingly calm, the calm of a woman who had been waiting for this moment for 23 years. "I'm not Evelyn. I'm not your wife. I'm not the woman you tried to kill." My father's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You died," he said. "You died. I went to your funeral. You went to an empty grave, Victor." She stood up. The black robe seemed to swallow the light around her. "You bought a plot of land, held a fake funeral and told everyone I was dead. But I was 300 miles away building a new life, a life you couldn't touch, a life where I became a judge, a life where I spent every single day waiting for you to make a mistake big enough to bring you down." "You can't do this," he said, louder now. "You're the judge. You can't. This is bias. This is a conflict of interest. I'll appeal. I'll take this to the Supreme Court if I have to. You'll do nothing." Her voice cut through his like a blade. "I am not ruling on this case because of who I am. I am ruling because of the evidence, and the evidence is clear." She turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard 3 days of testimony from the plaintiff. You have heard him claim that the defendant stole money from her dead mother's estate. But you have also heard, today, from the mother herself, a woman who is very much alive, a woman who has testified, in writing, that the plaintiff is lying, a woman who fled from this man to save her own life, a woman who has been waiting 23 years to tell the truth." The jury looked at each other. Some of them were crying. The woman who had shaken her head at me earlier was now looking at my father with undisguised disgust. One of the men in the back row had his hand over his mouth. "Furthermore," Judge Marsh continued, "this court has received additional evidence from a private investigator, Ms. Samira Khan, detailing decades of financial fraud, identity manipulation, domestic violence, and emotional abuse perpetrated by the plaintiff against his late wife and against his daughter." She picked up a thick file from her desk. Bank records showing that Victor Cross drained his wife's accounts before she fled. Police reports documenting multiple incidents of domestic violence. A restraining order that was ignored. A forged death certificate that Victor Cross submitted to the county recorder's office in 1994. And sworn affidavits from 3 women, who have come forward to say that Victor Cross abused them as well. My father's lawyer stood up, his face red. "Your Honour, I need a moment to confer with my client. This is highly irregular. We were not prepared for that." "You can confer with him in the holding cell." Judge Marsh nodded to the bailiff. "Mr. Cross, you are hereby found in contempt of court. Additionally, based on the evidence presented, I am dismissing the plaintiff's case with prejudice. Victor Cross is guilty of fraud, perjury, and obstruction of justice, and filing false documents. Bailiff, take him into custody." My father didn't go quietly. He screamed. He cursed. He lunged toward me, his hands reaching for my throat, his face twisted with rage. The bailiff grabbed him and wrestled him to the ground. His lawyers were shouting. The jury was being escorted out. Reporters were typing furiously on their phones, their faces alight with the story of a lifetime. Through it all, I sat still. I watched my father, the man who had lied to me for 23 years, who had stolen my mother from me, who had tried to steal my future, be led away in handcuffs. At the door, he turned and looked at me one last time. His face was red, streaked with tears of fury. "She was never coming back for you," he spat. "She left you. She chose herself over you. And she'll do it again. She's a coward, just like you." I didn't answer. I just looked at him. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing for him. Not love, not hate, not even pity, just emptiness. And the beginning of something new. The courtroom emptied quickly. Reporters rushed out to file their stories. My father's lawyers gathered their things in silence, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The bailiff led my father away, still shouting, until the doors closed behind him, and the sound of his voice faded into nothing. And then it was just me and the judge. She stepped down from the bench. For a moment she looked uncertain, unsure of what to do with her hands, her feet, her face. The black robe had made her seem untouchable, immortal, a force of nature. Without it, she was just a woman. A tired, sad, hopeful woman who had spent 23 years running from a monster and 23 years waiting for this moment. "Amelia," she said. "Mum," I said. We stood there, 10 feet apart, separated by 23 years and a million small wounds. And then she walked toward me. She was shorter than I remembered, softer. Her hands were thin, and when she put them on my face, they were shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry for every birthday, every Christmas, every night you needed me and I wasn't there. I'm sorry for every time you cried yourself to sleep and I didn't know. I'm sorry for every time you looked at that photograph and wondered if I had ever loved you at all. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I put my hands over hers. "You ran to survive," I said. "I understand." "Do you? Do you really?" I thought about the journal, the police reports, the knife, the terror my mother must have felt, waking up every day next to a man who might kill her. The courage it must have taken to leave everything behind, her home, her name, her daughter, just to stay alive. "I understand," I said again. And this time, I meant it with every fibre of my being. She pulled me into a hug. It was awkward at first, two strangers trying to remember how to hold each other. But then, it softened. Her arms wrapped around me the way they had when I was small, when I was hers, when the world made sense, and I let myself cry. For the first time since I was 5 years old, I let myself cry in my mother's arms. We stood like that for a long time. The bailiff came back, saw us, and quietly left. The lights buzzed. The clock ticked. And somewhere across town, in a holding cell, my father sat alone, wondering how he had lost everything. Victor Cross was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, perjury, obstruction of justice, and filing false documents. His construction company went bankrupt within a year. Vanessa divorced him and took everything she could. His so-called friends disappeared like smoke. By the time he gets out, he will be in his 70s. He will have nothing, no money, no family, no one waiting for him. I don't think about him much anymore. When I do, I feel a small, sad ache, not for the man he was, but for the father he could have been, the father I deserved. But I have made peace with the fact that I will never get that father, and I have stopped waiting for him to change. My mother, Eleanor, retired from the bench 6 months after the trial. She moved to the city where I live. We live 10 minutes apart. We have dinner together every Sunday. She tells me about her life, the years she lost, the woman she became, the cases she presided over, the friends she made. I tell her about mine, the loneliness, the anger, the slow process of learning to trust again. We are not perfect. There are gaps in our relationship that may never fully close. 23 years is a long time. There are memories she doesn't have. There are wounds I don't know how to heal, but we are trying. Every day, we are trying. And for now, that is enough. Last Sunday, she asked me if I was angry at her for staying away so long. I thought about the question for a moment. I was, I said. When I first found out you were alive, I was so angry I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream at you. I wanted to ask you how you could leave a 5-year-old girl with a monster. I wanted to tell you that you ruined my life." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "But then I read your journal," I continued, "and I read the police reports, and I realized that you didn't leave me. He took me from you. He stole me the essay. Me way he stole your name, your freedom, your safety. You didn't abandon me, you survived. And surviving isn't pretty. Surviving isn't clean. Surviving sometimes means making impossible choices that leave scars on everyone involved." She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become." I took her hand. "I'm proud of you too, Mum, for surviving, for waiting, for showing up when it mattered most." She squeezed my hand. And we sat there, mother and daughter, watching the sun set over the city, letting the silence heal what words could not. I kept the photograph Samira gave me, the one of my mother leaving the courthouse in her black robe. I framed it and put it on my nightstand, next to the old photograph of her holding me as a baby. 2 pictures. 2 versions of the same woman. The one who left and the one who came back. Some nights I look at them and think about how close I came to never knowing the truth. How close I came to believing my father's lies forever. How close I came to spending my whole life mourning a woman who was still alive. But I didn't. And that is the only victory that matters. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a plan. It's not anger, or violence, or even justice. Sometimes the best revenge is a woman in a black robe who refuses to forget. A mother who never stopped watching from a distance. A daughter who refused to become the monster her father tried to make her. And a courtroom where for one brief shining moment, the truth was finally louder than the lies. My name is Amelia Cross. My mother is Eleanor Marsh. And my father is nothing but a memory I am learning to leave behind.